Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, and we're sitting down to talk about Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 because it's the best time to be playing it, the best time to be talking about it because soon upon us is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. And I haven't played Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 since I reviewed it a little bit after the launch, and that was when it was at patch 1.3. It was still really buggy, and my experience was more middle of the road compared to what I see online, where people were like, this is a phenomenal game. For me, the story was alright. The gameplay was the most memorable part, but it was constantly interrupted by bugs. So I wanted to go back to it ahead of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and just brush up on things, check out some of the DLC I missed, and see how things are hanging when it comes to Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 in preparation for the sequel. So I'm just here to deliver some thoughts and hear some from you down below. So let me know what you're thinking for Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 in 2025. And of course, are you excited for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2? How are you feeling about it? Let me know down below. With that, let's get started. The thing that really defines KCD for me nowadays is the gameplay freedom. That's not a knock on the characters. There's charming ones like Hans Capon, which he's a hilarious dude to be around, no doubt about it. But this isn't like a Knights of the Old Republic experience for me where I watch these characters develop and grow and I fall in love with them. They're all charmers in different ways. And I do think the DLC in particular shows the added dimension of certain characters that maybe appreciate them more, but we'll get into that in a little bit. For me, it is about the gameplay freedom, the disguise system, and the reputation system, how people react to the things I do, but also how you could stealth around or kill anyone. And all this is achieved because of the core pillar that KCD is built around, and KCD 2 in turn is also built around, which is realism. And this goes into every single facet of the game. Obviously, in the combat, you can swing your weapon in 5 different directions. You can feint attacks or block. You can chain these slashes and stabs together for combos. And the great thing about this combat system is it's tough to hit God mode, which is a theme of this entire gameplay segment, right? It really is a game that makes you work for everything. And even by the time you're like mid-late to late game, even then, you're still working pretty hard in this game. Eventually, you can hit a point where you'll just, with certain weapons, one-hit everybody, but you have to work really hard to get there. Kingdom Come Deliverance does feature one of my favorite leveling system styles because it's very similar to what Oblivion does or what Skyrim does, where you level by doing, and you also get a perk with every second level. Now, perks will unlock new attacks, or there's even non-combat skills like drinking, and that's a skill that makes you more resistant to the effects of alcohol, which I just thought was really cool. But what the combat does well, even as you are scaling up in the early game, is it makes the simple one-on-two encounter that most gamers don't really blink at nowadays, you just run right through that, an actual oh shit moment. And that's exceedingly rare and difficult to pull off. But no doubt, one thing I don't think is sold well enough in current KCD reviews is how difficult it is to get into this game, because it's kind of how I define a Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. It's one of the best role-playing experiences. Yes, even in a post-Baldur's Gate 3 world, it is one of the best role-playing experiences you can have to date. But you have to accept that certain sessions are not going to go your way. You might fire up the game and say, okay, I'm going to bang out this side quest, I'm going to get this weapon, I'm going to do this mini game, I'm going to get that achievement. And the reality is you would be lucky if you got one of those done, because you might get hungry on the way. You know, you're feeling quite hungry, right? And then you have to go rest afterwards, and then you get ambushed as you're fast traveling somewhere to accelerate your progress. And then when you get ambushed, you're low on health, so you gotta rest again, and all of a sudden you've been completely derailed. If you can accept that part of the process, like say, a Breath of the Wild, a Tears of the Kingdom, where your session will just not go your way because a weapon broke, and to prepare for that big dungeon you were about to do, you need to now re-prepare for everything once more. If you can accept that sort of gameplay loop, you'll fall right in love with KCD. Because there's no real easy way around it. Like, okay, I don't like the melee combat, I'll do archery, but they don't even have a reticle. I will say I had better luck with blunt weapons. They just felt better. They hit a little bit harder, so I was feeling that. But yeah, man, there's no easy way around Kingdom Come Deliverance. And this isn't just in combat. This is things like, oh, you want to do alchemy with your mortar and pestle. Okay, well, you need to be able to read a recipe book. And in order to read a recipe book, you have to go find a scribe to learn how to read. And this is one of my favorite parts of the game, is it's so rooted in realism that based on Henry's upbringing, like, you know, he's in this small town, he's just a nobody, which makes him kind of the interesting character when it comes down to it, because he's just a normal dude and not like a superhero like you play as in most games. And because he's so normal, it's like, yeah, this guy needs to learn how to read first, and then I can get into alchemy. And even then, the steps you have to take in alchemy to mix and match and heat at certain times and everything, it's difficult. Again, it's a thing that you need to do because maybe you want to get savior snaps, which are how you save your game, at least at patch 1.0. Then they allowed you to exit save and certain things that made the game a little bit easier. But this is something that you're going to spend a lot of your money on in an early game to just save your game. It's ridiculous. They have more immersive mini games like the dice mini game where you can win money by playing that. There's carry weight management, which you have to also keep an eye on. And also, you have to manage the durability of your weapons and your armor, which can and will break. Not as bad as Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, but you know, this is something you have to keep an eye on. And fortunately, there are non-combat skills that can let you augment your armor, augment your weapons a bit so that you can keep them up to date while you're on the go. And it even tails into sleeping, eating, the two main things you really have to keep an eye on. When you're low on rest, that's bad. When you're low on food, that's really bad, especially because your food can spoil in your inventory. And if you eat low quality food, it's risky because it might give you food poisoning. And then because again, realism is the heart of this game, passage of time is another thing that is so easy to overlook based on how we were trained with other video games where NPCs do have schedules. Just like in many other games, Kingdom Come Deliverance also has NPCs with schedules. But now what you have to consider is, okay, I grabbed a side quest, and many of the side quests in this game are fantastic. I grabbed the side quest, I'm going to fast travel over here. That time goes, your quest expires. That's it. You waited too long. So it's kind of best to hop on it right away. But when you're managing all of these different elements in the game, it becomes a little bit stressful, which goes to my original point about something like Divinity Original Sin 2, where playthroughs are stressful, at least in the early going. So why is it worth it for so many people? Why is it so good? Why did I cover the first Kingdom Come Deliverance so extensively? Why am I back playing it right now as I'm chipping through this playthrough? Why am I doing all this? It's because of the gameplay freedom provided through these systems, and because it's still extremely unique, because these systems built around realism are just so hard to find nowadays, right? There are more big budget hardcore games coming out. I look at what Elden Ring did, right? Did not compromise on its vision. Same thing with Baldur's Gate. Did not compromise on the combat difficulty at all. Did not compromise on, yeah, you're going to make a choice and miss a whole entire part of the game. Didn't compromise on any of that whatsoever. But still, Kingdom Come Deliverance, because of its gameplay, finds itself in a unique pocket where it'll remind you of like a really good Bethesda Game Studios game like a Skyrim or an Oblivion, but it goes way more in the hardcore direction. And you know what's funny about all of this? There is literally a hardcore mode in this game that disables all of the UI. It also gives you these types of perks that you can get that are very negative for your character. And I haven't even touched this thing because I don't have the guts to, man. Like, this game's already hardcore in my opinion. Like, I'm good. I don't need another hardcore mode, but for the masochists, you can go ahead and check that out. More importantly, though, is that all of this freedom rooted in realism creates an open-ended quest system. So between everything mentioned before, you can still skill check, stealth, kill, disguise, or whatever you want, and risk your reputation to complete said tasks. Now, this will also inform how you get something like, say, loot. Instead of buying the best stuff or looting it off of dead bodies, maybe you're going to invest in some lockpicking. You're going to break into some stores and you're going to loot it yourself. Now, you may also get searched by guards in the town because they're going to learn of this theft, and now they are going to be on the hunt for whoever took said gear, but this is the risk you take based on your playstyle, and obviously, this, is accounting for the still awful lockpicking minigame. Now, since launch, they have added an easy mode to this thing, but it's still an absolute pain in the ass. And I've seen people in the comments, because we did a little retrospective for Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 on Retro Rebound. I saw people in the comments try to be like, oh, it's not that bad. I still think it's awful. And I go back to the basics of, I look at something like a Skyrim and I go, why are we trying to reinvent this wheel? We have a way to do it that works really well, that fits that realism theme, by the way, for something like Kingdom Come Deliverance. Why are we creating this mini game that just feels terrible, at least on a controller? I don't know. Even as I put more and more hours into this game when I first reviewed it, and even now, I struggle with it immensely, and it's a pain in the ass. But back to realism, what's cool about these skill checks we're talking about, okay, I want to, silver tongue my way through a little scenario here. Let's say I'm dirty. Well, guess what? Someone's going to notice that, and it's going to make my skill check even tougher. So that self-care through the realistic gameplay systems is actually something that will impact your reputation beyond the ramifications of the choices you make, because to enable said choices, you have to be, your Sunday finest effectively. So it's just a really unique game in that regard. And as we've seen with the sequel and the gameplay thus far, they're really continuing that direction of just some store vendors are not going to do business with you if you're like branded because you were caught doing crime, like that sort of thing. So I just love what they've established in the first game and how they're building upon it in the second one. It has me really excited. So it is a primary gameplay experience in my opinion. I think some people have kind of oversold what the story does. Don't get me wrong, it's good, but I never attached myself to Henry and his surrounding cast quite like I mentioned earlier with other games I absolutely adore. They're charmers, they're fun to be around, but I wouldn't say you're going to be overly compelled by each word that drips out of their mouth from the script. I mean, it's not quite on that level because the setup is pretty simple. You're playing as Henry of Skalitz and he's on a quest for vengeance because his hometown was slaughtered by Sigismund's army. And so it's a much longer introduction than I actually remembered. Like all of the fun stuff I'm talking about here is deeper in the game. After you get out of that introduction phase, then you're feeling pretty good, but it takes some time to get there, longer than I remember. Like everything I fondly remembered about KCD before diving in was, I felt like at the 10+ hour mark. And I didn't realize that where it's a bit of an uphill climb getting back into it if you have played this game before, in my opinion, because there's just certain things that don't have the novelty anymore. Like, oh, learning how to do the combat. It's like, I already kind of have an idea for this sort of thing. So stuff that felt very new back then has not aged as gracefully in the terms of pacing nowadays. But what I think builds the adoration for a character like Henry is the crazy stuff that you can do or situations that you can get in. It's got a little bit, not fully, of Yakuza energy, where Yakuza, you have this self-serious main character in Kazuma Kiryu, right? You have this guy who's just very stoic, very noble, and then he'll be like fighting dudes in diapers and in an office building or something like that. And you're just like, how did this man get into this situation? It's the way he's written and how he's reacting to the things around him that make the sub-stories in Yakuza so brilliant. And you get a little touch of that here in something like Kingdom Come Deliverance, albeit not as frequently, but you'll get side quests where you'll do a church sermon while you're hungover and you can just really botch it. There's a demon ritual with a horse that can talk and it's really crazy. You can hunt down a serial killer. You can partake in horse racing, and many of these are quests that you just can't leave hanging, not because, oh man, they're really good, but the second you find them, you should do them because remember that schedule I mentioned, as time passes on, sometimes these quests do expire. And that is, again, one thing you have to let go of yourself. A lot of these ideas sound great on paper, and I think they are great in execution, but many people love the idea of it, and then the execution part happens where you're playing the game, and that side quest that sounds really excited expires, and there's no way to reload your save because you didn't use a savior snap within a reasonable amount of time because it's a currency, not just a simple game mechanic. You get what I'm saying here, where you have to accept the idea that there's the possibility that you will get a side quest and you might end up not finishing it. And letting go of that, at least for me, is really tough. But these sorts of situations that Henry finds himself in, I think is what really won me over for him. But it did feel like, at least for me, as someone who covered the game extensively, and then once I was done reviewing the game, moved on with my coverage, and now we're back talking about KCD 2, I didn't really know what stemmed a lot of the love from the KCD community for its characters. It felt like I stepped into an entirely different world. You know, the memes about, I feel quite hungry. Didn't know that was a thing until very recently. The love for Hans Capen. Not that I had some sort of issue with him, but I didn't know he'd be this adored. The debate on who's going to be the canon lover in KCD 2. Like I said, it just felt like I stepped into a whole different world. And so I wanted to just check out the DLC a little bit. And there's 4 pieces of paid content. This matters a little bit less in the scheme of things if you buy something like the Royal Edition, so you get all of it packaged in. So just keep that sort of stuff in mind. But to keep it kind of brief, the one thing that you should know is that none of these are in particular raved about from the community, but there was one that caught me off guard and one that reminded me of another DLC I kind of really enjoy, so I thought it was cool. The first one I want to talk about is From the Ashes, because this is basically Kingdom Come Deliverance's Hearthfire. And I know a lot of people, seemingly based on Steam reviews I quickly read, didn't seem to like this, but I like the idea of having this little kind of homestead you chip away at with your extra money as you're going through the main quest. So I kind of like that. I know it's not as robust as like a town builder or a city builder, but I did like, oh, I have all this extra money, I'm going to go dump it here and become the bailiff of this area. And so again, it reminded me a lot of that DLC, which I did enjoy. Obviously, it went on to just infect every Bethesda Game Studios game afterwards with a settlement mode, but in its own little bubble, Skyrim and Hearthfire is really cool, and that's what From the Ashes reminds me a lot of. But the other DLC that really caught me off guard that I have more meaningful things to say about is a woman's lot, because this one does let you play as Teresa. And one DLC I really do love from a game that I think has some of the best DLC in gaming is Dragon Age Origins, where they have Liliana's Song. Liliana's Song is really interesting because in a game where you only play as the character you've created, this is the one time you step into the shoes of another character and see their story. And a lot of people had issues with Liliana's Song because why do we get to just see her backstory intimately? What about Alistair's song? What about, something like Morgan's song? Like, why don't we have these? And I think it was a fair question to ask, where some people who aren't Liliana fans just didn't know why BioWare had decided to do this. And so Warhorse kind of made an interesting decision where they made a DLC that was mostly about Teresa, who is the main lover for Henry. And you get to see the raid on Skalitz from her perspective. And this new POV grew some of my appreciation for her character. It shows what she went through in the meanwhile, and I felt really bad for her, but it also established the feelings that Teresa had for Henry early on in the game, which I think gave her a little bit more dimension beyond being the lover character for Henry. Again, I'm not going to oversell it. I just thought it was cool to see that added story dimension there. There were 2 other DLCs, the Band of Bastards, which just kind of felt like more questing as you helped along a mercenary band, and there was also the Amorous Adventures of Sir Hans Capeman, which was, a bunch of amusing adventures between Henry and Hans. That's, I think, the clear inspiration for some of the recent marketing of KCD2, where the actual real-life actors for these 2 characters are exploring together. But basically, you're playing wingman for Hans, and I think that is where a lot of the endearment for his character beyond the banter you have with him and some of the main story quests really stems from. So, yeah, that's kind of where I ended up with KCD1. Like, I still think it's a fantastic game, but it also still is a big gameplay driver for me, and I'm glad I figured this stuff out, because now I know really where my expectations and hopes are for KCD2. Like, I want to love the story more, because I remember with KCD1, I was not a big fan of the ending. Now, obviously, that's going to matter a little less with a sequel existing, but point being is, I hope things wrap up a little tighter with something like KCD2. I hope it doesn't kind of leave me hanging on the edge, so to speak. So yeah, I have some high hopes for that, but I also hope there's a little bit more of a tougher emotional gut punch delivery, because there is one kind of cool twist in KCD1 that I won't spoil for you that I really liked, but otherwise I felt it was missing a little bit of that oomph. So I'm hoping for more of that, but the gameplay freedom just is incredible. The systems design here is really good, and that's why I really love playing this game whenever I get a chance. Plus the mods are kind of awesome. I remember one of the first things I thought of when I saw KCD is, please add Star Wars mods in. And when someone did that, I downloaded it instantly and was running around with lightsabers in Kingdom Come Deliverance, and it was fantastic. So some of the mods here are also really cool if you want to check those out. But yeah, from the DLC to the main game to the gameplay freedom, KCD is still a really unique time all these years later. And it's because the things it does are very original and tough to replicate. So definitely check it out. Give it a chance if you have yet to, especially if you're a new player and your expectations are in the right place of like, okay, progress will be tough to come by. If you just expect that going in, I think you'll be in a good place. And honestly, maybe the story will over-deliver to you compared to where I set the expectations for it. So with that, let me know what you think of Kingdom Come Deliverance down below. I'm looking forward to getting your thoughts. Other than that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.